فهذا الفيديو عبارة عن جولة عادية، يعني في مادة الواحد بده يطرحها. المادة ليك الواقع قدامك وراك وحواليك. طبعا العصابات الإرهابية المسلحة متدافعة عن الديمقراطية. شو أكثر شيء دارجي هلا هون حلب زراري الغاز نهاح؟
طبعا
ما يستهدفوا هاي الأهداف اللي وراي، شايفيني؟ بزرار الغاز وبالهواء. هدول هذا إرهابي، هذا الصبي اللي وراي، هذا نظر الإرهابي. إرهابي هو ما يطبق الدين الإسلامي يا أخي، وقت ما زدت لجرة الغاز هيك عشوائيا بين العالم.
صاروا يقصوا علينا ويضربوا علينا قذائف الإرهابيين، الله لا يرحمهم، وقتلوا لي أمي هنيك. صرت أنا أبكي كثير بدفنوها هنيك. هلا استمري نفسك حبيبي أنت، وبعدين جيت لهون؟ إيه دغري إجينا لهون. شو اسمك يا خالد؟ عبادة. شو اسمك؟ عبادة. هنيك كنا طالعين من بيتنا صاروا يقصوا علينا.
إن شاء الله ما حدا صار له شيء؟
لا بس أمي الله يرحمها.
أمك توفت وقتها؟
إيه.
هلا مع مين عايش أنت؟
هلا أنا عايش مع ستي وجدي وأهل أمي.
At the age of 13, I had to flee my country illegally because of a war zone, and I'm here to talk about it. I was born in 2000. I think growing up in Syria was, for me as a kid, I had a good life. I had good friends. I was happy growing up and grateful. Syria was a beautiful country. For me, it's still a beautiful country, and I wish I can go back there one day.
Is there a reason why you can't go back to Syria right now?
Yeah, there are many reasons actually. One reason, I might get taken in the airport to go to join the army or even go to prison because I have an uncle who was against the government. He got shot and taken. We still don't know if he's alive or dead. Because of that, we have a whole question mark on the family name. He was helping people in the neighborhood I used to live in. And because of that, the government considered him as a terrorist for some reason. They shot him and he was taken. And every time we ask about him, the answer is always, we don't know.
When did you realize that it was time to leave Syria? And why did you leave illegally?
So in the beginning, people used to protest weekly. It was peaceful protests. No one was harmed. Few months into that, and it went from one end, where we had peaceful protests, into the other extreme end, where we get shot at. At the time, I did not participate in any protest because I was too young. I was around 11. But that happened in my area. We used to hear shots, gunshots all the time. The reason why I left Syria illegally is simply because the process of trying to get a visa, obviously you can't get it from Syria, you'll have to travel to a neighboring country, such as Lebanon at the time, and apply for a visa at the embassy, which was impossible to get, almost impossible. The queue was way too long. Everyone in Syria wanted to leave. And by the time you get an appointment, you might die in Syria, just waiting. Every single day in Syria was putting our lives in danger, really. So my mom had a friend. She escaped Syria with the smuggler. she recommended the smuggler for us. So we contacted him. We never actually met up with this person. He told us to go to Tanzania with our Syrian passports. And that's how our journey started. So we went to Tanzania with our Syrian passports. When we arrived in the morning, maybe 3 in the morning. It was completely dark. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know if this smuggler was gonna kidnap us or sell our organs. We didn't know what's gonna happen. A random guy approached us in the airport and he told us to get in a taxi. At that point, as I said, I was 13. We didn't know what to expect. I was scared. I was nervous. I was nervous because we already left Syria and there's no way back. You know, at that point, when you escape, you don't look back anymore because we're not thinking about going back to Syria. And we don't know where we're gonna end up, which is kind of scary. And then we ended up staying in Tanzania for a month and a half, in Zanzibar specifically. We got to know the smuggler a little bit more. So it wasn't the smuggler himself. He had a person in every country we went to. So he had a person working for him in every country. We ended up staying in Tanzania for a month and a half. We had to go on a boat first, go to Dar es Salaam, which is the capital of Tanzania, and then we got a bus to another city in Tanzania also. And then we stayed there for like 3 days. We got given passports, European passports, and we were told to remember the names, memorize them, the names, date of birth, in case we get asked in the airport. So at this point, the smuggler booked tickets from Tanzania to Uganda. He wanted to try the passports first. So the smuggler would pick a small airport in Africa where people, the staff in the airport, they wouldn't recognize a fake passport. They can't tell a real one from a fake one. That's why the smuggler would take us to random countries. Then we arrived to Uganda with fake passports. We stayed there for 2 weeks, and then we didn't know that we're gonna leave in 2 weeks. We just stayed in a house, and then the day before our flights, he would give us the tickets, the passports, European passports, and he told us to memorize the names and everything for the next day. So the next day on the last day we go to the airport. Our flight was supposed to go to Qatar, transfer flight, and then go to Italy. The first day we went to the airport, they actually suspected that we have fake passports in Uganda. So what they did, we had Albanian passports. They called the embassy, the Albanian embassy, and they told my brother to read the first page in Albanian. And it did not go well. Yeah, my brother doesn't speak Albanian, unfortunately. So they knew he wasn't Albanian. They knew these passports are fake, but they gave us the passports back, and they told us to go home and go back to Tanzania and not try to go from Uganda. It seemed like a warning, but we told the smuggler. We didn't care as much, and the smuggler, he was like, okay, we'll try again. Then we stayed there for maybe 2 weeks, and we never knew when we're gonna leave. Like, the smuggler doesn't tell you. You just stay there until, one day he calls you and tell you, your flight is the next day at this time. That's what happened. One day, we got told that we have a flight from Uganda to Qatar. We change flights in Qatar, and then we go to Italy on the second flight. We tried the second time, and they started questioning us, but then they let us on the flight. We were surprised. We went to Qatar, and then we had to go, to the gate to get on the second flight. And as soon as they saw our names on the passports, they took us to the side. It was the worst experience in any airport in my whole life. the way they treated us like murderers in Qatar, in the airport. They don't even look at you when they speak to you. They don't even listen to what you're saying. I was with my mother, my brother, and me. I was 13 at the time. They were questioning me. They took me to a room by myself. They were interrogating me. They strip searched me in the airport. We spoke to the smuggler in the airport, and he said, if they send you back to Uganda, you are going to prison in Uganda. So do whatever it takes for them not to send you back. The problem is we didn't have our real passport at the time, because if we did, we could have booked a flight to another country. But we didn't. Our passport was with the smuggler. Yeah, and that was the problem. We had to get our passport somehow to Qatar, and we're stuck in the airport, and they could send us back to Uganda at any point, and we go to prison. Eventually, my mom had to threaten the police officers after all the interrogation, strip search, everything. My mom was crying, and she was scared about us.
How long did you stay in Qatar, the airport? How long was the interrogation?
So that happened within a day. And there is an international law, so you can't stay in any airport for longer than 24 hours. That's why within 24 hours they had to send us back. We were literally fighting time at the point. We spoke to the smuggler and we told them, we need a way to get our passports in less than 24 hours. We didn't have our passports after the first 24 hours. And at that point, my mother threatened that she will swallow a whole bottle of pills if they forcefully send us back. And only then they started listening to us. They didn't want that to happen publicly. They didn't want anyone to know how they're treating people who are escaping war. We eventually met with the general manager of Doha Airport, and he was the only person who was able to give us permission to stay longer than 24 hours. We ended up staying for 3 days in the airport. I did not sleep for 3 days. The smuggler sent our passports with the airlines. I'm not sure how he sent our passports to Qatar, and then we booked tickets to Turkey. So after the 3 hectic days in Qatar, we finally managed to go to Turkey with our real passports. So the smuggler, eventually he gave the passports to the Qatari Airlines, and they got them to Qatar, and we used them to go to Turkey. And in Turkey, it was relatively good times. We stayed there for like a month and a half. We lived with another family in a house. We had some Syrian food. It wasn't too bad. Eventually, the smuggler knew someone in the Brazilian embassy in Turkey. So what he did, he gave us real visas, legit visas on our Syrian passports to go to Brazil. And he also gave us fake European passports, new ones. It was a different nationality. So we took both of these passports and we went to Brazil. But the trick was that before we enter Brazil on the airplane, we would switch. So we used the legal ones to leave Turkey, and we used the fake European ones to enter Brazil and get a stamp on them, because that was really important for the smuggler. Because if you have a stamp to enter the country, when you're trying to leave, they look for the stamp of entry, and it makes leaving the country a lot easier. And that's what happened. We stayed in Brazil for 4 or 5 days, and we used the same passports to get out, and we got to London, Heathrow. When we arrived at Heathrow Airport, the smuggler told us to get rid of our passports straight away, so they can't send us back anywhere. We arrived at Heathrow. I went to the toilet, just destroyed my passport, flushed it down the toilet. Yeah, the fake one and the real one. That happened before the boarding stage, before they stamp your passport. And then we had to go to them and speak to them. We did not speak English at the time, so they had to get a translator for us. Yeah, they sat us down, they brought us food. They were smiling, they were looking in your eyes when they speak to you. So yeah, we were treated like humans when we arrived here.
How long have you been in the UK now, and where do you live?
We arrived in 2014. When we arrived, we stayed in London for 3 days, and then we got sent to Liverpool. When we arrived to Liverpool, it was challenging at the start. We lived in a camp where it's kind of like a hotel in a way, but you look after yourself. And for the first few months, it was difficult because we didn't speak English, and we didn't know the area. We had no one, so it was very challenging. And then we had to do my mom had to do an interview for all the documents and the papers, which we eventually, after 6 months maybe, we got a visa to stay in the UK. After 6 months of living in Liverpool, I went to school. I was in year 10. I had some English support lessons. A year after that, I started making friends. I finished my GCSEs, did my A-levels, and now I'm at university.
After all these years, is it safe for you to go back to Syria?
For many Syrians, it's really hard to go back to Syria. And that's for many reasons. Main reason is for Syrian men, it's hard for them to go back because the army in Syria is compulsory. And for me, if I want to go back to Syria and I haven't served in the army and now I'm over 18, I'll be taken in the airport to go join the army. Even if I have another citizenship, doesn't matter. It's the area, like on your ID in Syria, if you have Berze on it, that's it, red flag, you know what I mean? If you live Berze, the address, that's it, even if you're not from the family. Now, even after the war, my cousin would be he tells me on the phone, he'll be driving his car and then he stops on a road checkpoint, and as soon as they see his ID, Berze, he has to give them some money to overlook, because he's done nothing, but just so he goes quicker. Instead, if he doesn't pay them money, he would have to wait for half an hour for them to check if he has a criminal record or anything. So yeah, he's just used to bribing them occasionally, and that's literally every time he leaves the house.
And that's just because it's the area he was from in Syria?
Yeah, so on his ID it says where he lives, Berze, and as soon as they see that, because of the history of that area, a lot of people protested from that area. And I grew up in Berze as well. For me personally, it's very difficult, and as I mentioned earlier, my uncle was shot and taken during the war because he was supplying the area with food and necessities. So they treated him as if he was helping a terrorist organization, but he was helping just normal people like me and you. This put a question mark on the family name, and not only the family name, even the address on my ID would cause so much trouble for me. I could be taken for no reason.
Do you have any final words you want to add?
There are many refugees and asylum seekers coming from all around the world, whether they are in Europe or in the UK, whether they are Syrian or not. We all have something in common, which is we all left everything behind and trying to start a new life from zero. And I know it can be challenging at the start, it can be difficult for all of us, but I have hope and faith that we're going to do good.
Thank you.
Thank you.